Al, it's time to talk about a reboot of a series that had a very divisive launch, let's say. It was something, all right, but we're going to dive into it because I played through this game and I live to tell the tale.
I saw bits of it, but not all of
Yes,
it.
you sure did see bits of it. Look at that Game Boy.
Look at him. I had to
He's
send you a picture.
hiding,
I'm sorry.
hiding in the bathhouse. Anyways, hello, welcome to this week's episode of the Seasonal Anime Checkup OVA. It's a podcast where we have conversations about video games, anime, and manga. I'm Jared, joined as always by Doc Al and Ladium.
Hello.
This is episode 322, and we are talking about the 2022 reboot of Saints Row.
Mm-hmm. I was interested in this for one reason and one reason only,
Mm-hmm.
and then it didn't actually happen.
To be
'Cause
fair, I did make a messed up character, but I just didn't use them.
Yeah, that was my big thing. I was like, oh man, I've seen the characters Jared makes with character creation tools. I am so excited. He's gonna make a monstrosity. You will.
I mean, to be fair, you can make some monstrosities in that character creator. You also make like people that look like honestly like their real life selves, which is very wild to think of.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean,
But
yours
anyway,
looks like a regular person.
regular old person. Yep. Anyways, yes, this is Saints Row. They just retitled it as Saints Row because it's just a reboot, I guess. That's how you do things.
Yep.
This came out on August 23rd, 2022 on the PlayStation 4 and 5, the Windows, the Xbox One, the Xbox Series X and S, and the Google Stadia.
Was this one of the last releases for Stadia?
Probably not.
I don't remember when Stadia
I feel like that was like a couple months ago,
murdered itself.
but I don't remember. Either way, that came out for all those platforms. Was definitely met with mixed reviews, let's say. From the Metacritic, it has a 65 out of 100 on PC, a 61 on PS5, and a 65 as well on the Xbox Series X and S version.
September 2022 is when they announced it shut down Stadia.
Well, there you go.
Anyway, sorry.
A lot of problems people had with this was that it was very buggy at launch.
Uh-oh.
And then also there was concerns with the writing, the gameplay, a lot of stuff in this game. I played this obviously well after the fact, where they had done a few patches to this game to try and make it less buggy. There were still some problems with it when I played through it, so that's not entirely great. But it isn't as like super broken as I think it was at launch, so that's at least a positive in that direction.
Yeah, that is. I remember you had some kind of weird glitch when I was watching, but I don't remember what it was.
I think I had a few times where like the game was like, we're gonna let you run around, but like you can't do anything.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I guess I'll just reboot the game.
Great.
Thanks. Fun.
Woo.
Anyways, let's talk about the development of this game real quick.
Oh boy,
We'll
let's
get
do
into
it.
the actual game. THQ Nordic announced in August 2019 that Volition was developing a full entry in the Saints Row series. Parent organization Koch Media, I forget how to pronounce that. Owner of the Saints Row intellectual property said they were giving the developer time and space to make the game they saw fit. The series had a rocky history in the years prior to the reboot's development. The prior full game of the series was Saints Row 4, which, need I remind you, came out in 2013.
And ruled.
9 years ago, which was followed by a standalone expansion titled Saints Row Gat Out of Hell in 2015. A series spin-off, Agents of Mayhem, sold poorly and led to layoffs at Volition. Saints Row was officially announced as a reboot of the franchise at the August 2021 Gamescom, which was met with divided opinion on social media for not retaining the feel of prior series entries. The reboot was intended to pull away from the wacky tone of Saints Row 4 and later games in the series, instead bringing back the balance between comedy and seriousness that Saints Row 2 had. Volition's Jeremy Bernstein compared Saints Row 4 to Moonraker of the James Bond film series, I guess that's a thing, having gone so far outside the realm of reality that they needed to reel it back in. Studio development director Jim Boone added that the current social climate had outgrown the tone of prior Saints Row games. Some of the more lewd elements, like the giant purple dildo that could be used as a weapon, was cut for this reason. The game's developer Volition looked to action films as a reference point for what they wanted players to experience, including the feel-good vehicular movement of Baby Driver, the brutal stylized combat of John Wick, and the extravagance of Hobbs and Shaw, that Saints Row sort of flavor. The game was originally supposed to come out on February 25th, 2022, but was later delayed until August 23rd, 2022.
It's a delay.
Yes. And then there's apparently post-release expansion packs, which include at least 3 pieces of DLC, which I don't think any of those are out yet. So we can't comment on any of those. They're just there.
They exist
also,
eventually,
yes,
maybe.
They do exist. Let's see here. This says that by October 2022, Saints Row had attracted more than 1 million players.
Wow.
In November of 2022, the Embracer Group stated that Saints Row did not meet the full expectations and left the fan base partially polarized, but financially performed in line with management expectations in the quarter. Subsequently, that's the word, announced that Volition would be transferred from Deep Silver to Gearbox Entertainment, stating that it has all the tools, including an experienced management team in the U.S. to create future success at Volition, which is interesting.
Ugh.
But yeah, this was a divisive game, to say the least. I think the problem comes with this is that when you look at a game like Saints Row 4, which is just very bombastic, very over the top, very ridiculous, which kind of had became it got to the tip of the top of where they could go with that series.
Right.
There's not much you can do to really pivot back and like make a sequel to that.
Right.
So I think
you either continue going full on ape or you have to figure out a way to reel it back in.
Right. So I think rebooting the series was the right call. It just makes it very hard to kind of like get back into the tone of like the earlier Saints Row games when your last 2 games have been just like super over the top ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
And like there's still some of that over the top ridiculous here, but it is very much more grounded than those previous entries were. It is, I think, interesting as well that like they talked about how the social climate of the world has changed in the 9 years since Saints Row 4, where they don't really go into a lot of kind of like, what's the way it looks like, the sophomore humor that you would expect from these kind of games.
Right.
Like that kind of stuff is not really super prevalent here, which I think is probably the right call, because it's hard to really kind of do that and make that sort of stuff work in today's age and today's society, where you could have probably done it 10 years, 15 years, 20 years prior. So I think that was actually a good step in the right direction. And even though I think some of the times the writing isn't as good as previous entries, like they're still able to create humor in ways that doesn't necessarily fall back on, cheap tricks like that. Let's see here. What else do I want to talk about with this video game? There's a lot of jokes about having to pay off student loans, and that's why you're doing crime.
I mean, that's fair.
It's kind of like, you're like, yeah. It does start off kind of weird because like your character is riddled with debt, so like you're trying to find a job and you decide to work for this private military corporation.
Ugh.
And like that's how the beginning of the game starts. So you kind of like start this game off and you're just like, I don't know about this.
Yikes.
And then eventually you have to leave that company because of something that happened, and you form your own gang, which becomes the Saints and everything, with like your roommates who are the key side characters throughout the game that you hang out with and you do missions with and all that sort of stuff, which I grew to really like as over the course of the game. Like I think they have good characterization. They have a lot of good banter with you and with each other throughout the game. It just takes kind of a little bit of a while to really let them grow on you, I think. But once you do, I think they have a lot of good, fun moments scattered throughout, like the, past the first third through the end game of Saints Row. So I think that works out pretty well. The story itself is kind of just, boilerplate. It doesn't really do anything new in this series. Doesn't do anything new in this genre or anything. It's very original Saints Row-ish, where it's like, hey, there's these other gangs out in this city, and eventually you're going to take them over and move them out, so you have more control over the city, and that unlocks, more of the story, and you fight against them and do all this sort of stuff. Like, There's like one, two, three, three gangs, I think, something like that. Two of them are kind of just like gangs that you would kind
Gang
of understand.
gang.
The other one is the PMC you used to work for,
Oh,
and you go into different parts of the city and everything, and they basically are like, this part of this gang will have this control of this part of the city, this gang will have this part of control of the other part of the city, and vice versa, and all that sort of stuff. And you can like do little like side activities that will like get you more influence in those areas to drive out those gangs and everything. And then there'll be story related stuff that will be like, okay, well, you're going to go up against the boss of this gang and do all this sort of stuff, and that's how you fight back against them. It kind of goes like in order from like one gang, and then here's the next set of story stuff, and it's this gang, and then the next set of story stuff, and it's this gang, essentially.
I think the part that I watched was some gal who had her car stolen. It was like her mom or grandma's car or something, and it got driven off a cliff.
Right.
That's the part that I watched.
That was very early on.
And then I also saw a part with oh shoot, it was somebody I recognized, the voice actor. Um
Greg Chun.
yes, Greg Chun. I was like, that's definitely Greg Chun. That's
Yes.
100% him. I recognize that voice. Uh but he like got kidnapped. Is that correct?
Yes.
And
Yes.
then taken to like a weird towery thing that you were climbing. Those are the only two parts I really saw.
Mm-hmm.
Um I do remember that at one point there were like a bunch of like weird gang trucks that came up on you and like a like canal type thing,
Mm-hmm.
a dry canal.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was where the glitch happened. I remember that.
I don't remember what the glitch was.
I don't know, but I remember it was a weird glitch and you died.
That sounds about right.
And then you had to start it all over again.
That sounds about right.
That's what I remember.
Yeah. Also, the area they put you in is basically kind of modeled after Las Vegas, or also just like southeastern or southwestern United States kind of just feel. Essentially, it's kind of just like a mixture of those two things. I think it works well as like an area because like it's not really an area that you really go to a lot in video games.
Hmm.
So I think it's fine. It is very brown because obviously it's the desert.
Yeah, it's quite brown.
So it's not necessarily the most like luxurious or just like easy to look at kind of locale, but it is a different locale than what you're accustomed to in most video games for sure.
Not a whole lot of color there. Nope.
Nah, but I think it's okay.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, the story is basically the story begins where like you're doing this party and you're already like well established and everything, and then you get buried alive, and then it takes you back to the beginning of the story where it's like okay, here's how we lead you up to where this buried alive thing happens, and you'll understand how everything all the steps that lead up to this and what actually happened and all that sort of stuff. So
I
you're
think I
kind
was
of
on a Zoom call when you were like getting back to that part or something because I didn't see it, but I remember you being like, "Oh man, this is the beginning of the game. I was buried
yes,
alive," and I was like, "What?"
yes. In one of the first missions, you're like when you're working for the PMC, you're tasked with trying to like capture this major criminal called the Nahwali.
Nawali?
Yeah. Um, and essentially you're able to take him down and you capture him. And that leads you to getting like promoted in the PMC and everything's all good, yay! And then eventually you get fired from the PMC, and then you form the Saints and all that sort of stuff. And you got to find ways to get people to work for you. You got to find ways to pay them and everything. You got to find a place to hang out and have be your headquarters essentially. Got to do all this sort of stuff to get like set up and everything. And one of the things you do is you go out and break out that dude that you captured originally in the game. So he becomes eventually like an ally to you, and you work together to plan this big heist where you're going to like steal from like a federal reserve that's on like a big train.
Hmm.
I feel like there's a part in this where you literally are towing back the a big safe off the train like it's Fast Five. And I was like, yeah, that's pretty good. I can appreciate that. So a lot of this is like you trying to like build up your trust with this dude and trying to like get him on your side, and eventually he does. And there's a lot of like weird things you do with this dude to like get his trust. Like you go on this like friendship outing where it's just like, all right, everyone's just gonna go do an activity that they want to do, and we're all gonna like bond together as a group, do all this sort of stuff. They get these like hats made for it, and it's very dumb and goofy, but then it turns out to like it's very much like plot or supposed to be like a non-violent outing. It's just like, oh, we're gonna do things that we don't like, do things where we shoot people and do that sort of stuff, but eventually it turns into that because of course it does. It's a Saints Row game,
right?
But I thought that was kind of like a very dumb and goofy way to try and get this guy into your group and everything. There's eventually a subplot within the game where like the PMC you used to work for buys out your group because of a contract or a thing in the contract that you signed originally. So like it's basically a non-compete clause. So they take ownership of the Saints, and you have to like
oh no,
find a way to stop that, and that basically entails like getting the chairperson of the company ousted via the other stockholders, because like there's another lady that you saved on one of your missions who you start to like form a partnership with to get him out and everything, and you're able to do that by like causing just a bunch of destruction via their AI tanks, and it causes the stock to plummet, so the shareholders vote him out and vote this lady in, and then she's like, all right, here you go, you can have your gang back. And that's it. That's how you deal with the PMC.
Well,
easy things like that.
Yeah.
And then basically you get to the end of the game, and that's where we get back to the beginning of the game. That's full circle. Makes a lot of sense. You do this party because you're having so much success and everything. You just want to hang out with your pals and have a good time. You invite the Nawali. He's like, hey, I'll come over. Hey, let me have a little chit chat with you, the player character.
Character.
I'm really enjoying hanging out with the Saints. Also, I'm going to take the Saints for myself. Let me stab you, and then I'm going to bury you alive.
Right.
Shock and swerve. He has betrayed you, and now he's kidnapped your friends and making them act like they like him.
Oh no.
And they're his friends.
Oh no.
So essentially, you have to like dig yourself out of this grave and patch yourself up, and then basically just run through this like giant casino where he's holed up and go all willy-nilly and destroy all his people. Eventually you have a shootout on top of the casino, which is actually a pretty cool moment, where it's like a western shootout essentially.
Did it have the sound effect?
It might have.
Because it should.
It might have.
You know what sound effect I'm talking about.
Yeah.
The western sound.
Yes. But that was pretty fun. And then essentially you get your friends back and you celebrate on top of this roof, and then that's just the end of the game. So I think like as a whole, like it does a good job of kind of like building this new universe, building this new set of characters, letting you see exactly like how like they go from nothing to a lot of stuff. And I think there is promising things you could do here if you decided to make another game. There's also like interesting little references to like the previous Saints Row games that make you kind of think like, obviously this is still the same universe, so like what if they decided to like integrate these two in some way? Which I think that could be interesting to like bring these two sets of characters together in a fun and interesting way. I think, like I said, I think overall it's fine. It doesn't do a whole lot that's like groundbreaking or new or anything like that nature, but as a reboot for a series of this nature, I think it does the job it needs to do to establish a new set of characters, a new universe, a new setting, and just get the ball rolling essentially. Like I think if you made another one of these games, that's when you can kind of start going in the wackier directions, because you've already established all this stuff. You don't have to like, focus most of the game in doing that sort of stuff. so you can kind of start going weird in whatever weird direction you want to.
Hmm.
Considering this is the Saints Row series. I mean, to be fair, like this game in itself has a whole subplot of you doing a live action roleplay tournament. So like there is a bunch of there is wacky stuff in this game. It's just like, again, you compare it to previous entries in the series, like the past like Saints Row 3 and 4. It is not remotely close to that amount of wackiness.
Where you were the president with superpowers.
God, that was so good.
It was so good.
So good. Also, I think the soundtrack of this game's not that great, which is really unfortunate because I feel like Saints Row games in particular have very good soundtracks, but this one just didn't have a lot for me, which I mean, obviously it's music, it's very subjective, so like it's going to be probably really cool for someone else, but not so much for me. Like, I think the most interesting stuff in here was like the classic rap section, which had a lot of stuff that I was into, but like all the other stuff I was kind of just like, not really feeling it.
I remember you showed me the radio stations. I was like, oh, okay. Well then, this is mid at best.
It does have Party Up by DMX, so you can feel like you're playing Tiger Woods PGA Tour 05 again.
And I mean, what else do you need in life, right?
I mean, that song goes hard, so it is pretty good to drive around to. Let's be real.
But you need more than one song.
I mean, it's true. It's true. So I think that was kind of a real big bummer, because I know like going into this I was like, oh man, I wonder what the soundtrack of this game's going to be, because I love the Saints Row soundtracks, and then getting to this is like, oh, that's something. I will say as well, like I think gameplay wise, it's definitely just an average open world game. Like it just feels like another one of those. Like it definitely. This is going to be a kind of a weird thing, but I think I saw someone else say this, but it definitely rings true. This has the feeling of an Xbox 360 game.
Oof.
Just as the way like it feels and just how it plays and everything. It definitely feels like it's a game that you played 10 years ago and hasn't evolved.
But not the brilliant Xbox 360 game Lost Odyssey, because that was good. It was a good game.
Not everything can be that, no.
I know.
But yeah, I mean, it's hard to see exactly how they could really, change this formula, because like, it's just a very rudimentary formula that's been used since, Grand Theft Auto 3 at this point. But they really don't do anything like really new or interesting with it. It's just like, if you've played one of these, you've definitely played this before.
Right.
So that's kind of also, I think, disappointing in a sense that they don't really do anything new with it, but it's also not super surprising, I would say. But yeah.
Are you hearing him?
No.
Game Boy's like, I want more crime. He's been just chattering away for the past 2 minutes.
Game Boy just wants all the crimes.
He wants more crime.
He's a crime man. But yeah, Saints Row, the reboot, is definitely a reboot.
I was so confused when you booted it up to screen share with me, and I was like, this is a regular person. What is this?
Yep, regular normal person.
To be fair though, she was cute, so like I can't blame you.
Yeah, I think I wanted to play this game with like a normal character first off, because like it would have been too much if I would have put in like one of my monstrosities into this.
Your mutated freak fish.
Yeah, like I don't know if that would have necessarily hit the same way. Like if I wanted to play this again at some point, like that's the time to do it, or like do a co-op run, that's the time to do it.
Right.
But I think playing it the first time through is just like I want this to have a little bit of normalcy to it.
Oh boy. It's funny.
Yeah. I will say as well, like they definitely there's definitely, like I said, there's a lot of like southwestern US influence in this game, a lot of like Mexican influence into this game as well. It was kind of weird looking through the credits and seeing a whole lot of white people who worked on this game.
Well,
so that was something. I mean, like, to be fair, it doesn't feel like they're like doing cultural appropriation or anything like that. It's just like It's one of those things you would have expected like more non-white people on in that sort of way.
Right.
But yeah, I really wonder what they're going to really like do with this. Because like we mentioned at the top of this podcast, like it didn't really review well. It
Mhm.
apparently sold well enough for Embracer Group to be like, we're fine with the numbers in this quarter, but where exactly is this going to land it per se? Like, are they going to want to do another one of these? Are they going to feel like that the brand has been damaged because of this game in a way that like people aren't going to want to play a sequel, or would they just be like, I will just go forward with it, who cares, whatever, we'll make another one of these.
Mhm.
It's a very interesting question, and I think like you could, like I said earlier, you could do more interesting things with a sequel to this. It's just like, are they going to be able to do that, and what exactly will they do with this? It's definitely a lot of like more questions that need to be, or that if you've been left unanswered than are answered following the end of this game. And not necessarily because of like the story itself or anything, it's more just like the outside influences that are going to be pushed upon this game as a whole.
Mhm.
I guess we will see exactly like they have 3 pieces of DLC they still have to do. So if all 3 of those come out, maybe that's a good sign that they would want to keep building upon this reboot series in a way. Or if sometime down down the line, they're like, yeah, we're not really gonna commit to doing all 3 of these DLCs. That's probably a sign of like, this is in trouble. This is not going well. So it's going to be very interesting to see exactly the future of this game and where they decide to go with it after this, after the divisive nature of the video game.
Fun divisiveness.
Who
What
doesn't love that?
I mean, could do without it, but what can you do?
Yeah. Anyways, that's Saints Row.
Saints Row. Saints
Saints
Row
Row
5, that's not
2022
5.
video game. Saints Row, not to be confused with Saints Row. Game developers should stop naming games that have already been named and make different titles if you're going to reboot a series.
No, I agree. Like, give it a subtitle or something.
Just do something that's just not, hey, you remember Saints Row? Well, we just named it Saints Row again.
Yeah, that just makes things
Thumbs
confusing.
up, let's go.
Makes things so confusing.
Yeah, it's not. It's not great. It's
Nope.
not great.
It's not great. Don't do it.
Anyways, I think that's going to do it for this episode. Short episode, but like, it's an open world crime game. You kind of understand what these games are.
Right.
But
And
yeah.
we're also going against like my power going in and out. So short episodes is probably a good idea.
Yes, power going in and out, Al being kind of sick.
Yeah.
We're speeding along here.
We're struggling today. Or at
Anyway,
least
yeah.
I'm struggling today.
You're definitely struggling today. For sure. But yeah, that's going to do it for this week. So if you'd like more from us, head on over to seasonalanimecheckup.com or sac.cool. It's where you can find past episodes of this podcast and other podcasts like Jared and Al watch. You can also find columns and reviews on the site as well. If you'd like more from Anladium, go to anladium.com. She's got columns and reviews. You can follow us on Twitter and TikTok at AnimeCheckup. You can buy our books, One Shiny Moment, A Critical Analysis of Love, Life, Sunshine, and Hot Tubs and Pac-Man on Amazon.com. And you can support us on Patreon, patreon.com/SACOVA. Buy us a slice of pizza, get access to unedited versions of the podcast early, and a whole wealth of bonus content as well. Next week, it's the first episode of March.
Oh my God.
So we'll talk about something new then.
Something new.
It'll be something, I don't know. We'll figure it out.
Yeah.